Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andy Roark. Guys, I am here with Dr. Steve Marks. He is the founding dean at Clemson University's College of Veterinary Medicine. I asked him a little bit about how's it been going, and it's always fascinating to hear when people are doing incredible things like starting vet schools. They have 7 buildings under construction at the same time right now. It's a big project, but that's not really what I'm digging for today. I am really interested in how vet students get trained and what the experience of the vet students is. And I keep coming back and thinking about this distributed model of veterinary education where instead of having a teaching school, we are sending vet students out into practices to get their education. Now, Clemson is interesting. I really want to talk to Dr. Marks because Clemson has chosen to do a semi-distributed model, meaning they have facilities, they are going to have rotations, they've got a community clinic, things like that. They're doing some large animal work and things at Clemson University. And they're also sending students out to do some of their education in a distributed way. It's not the type that, that I did where I had, 2 or 3 2-week externships. It's definitely much more robust than that as terms of sending students out to get their education. But it's not the full-on, we don't have a medical hospital sort of approach that some other schools are using. And so I want to talk to him about the distributed model because here's a guy who's kind of picked the middle path. And so I'm like, talk to me about this. How is this going to work? Do you have these concerns? I asked him about vet students being overly wooed and recruited when they're trying to get their education. I asked him about corporate practices coming in and putting together significant programs to try to absorb some of these students. And how do we feel about that? And it's a really interesting conversation about what does education and development and creation of doctors look like 5-10 years from now. And I got good answers. I really appreciate Steve's. I think he's honest. I think he was really candid. He's a very likable guy. I'm really optimistic about what Clemson's doing because they're right down the road from my house. And so I'm really rooting for them. I feel like they're in good hands. Guys, let's check it out. Get into this episode. Here we go.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Steve Marks. Thank you for being here, my friend. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You and I met before. You are, for those who don't know you, you are the founding dean at Clemson University's College of Veterinary Medicine. And so you and I met in that capacity. You're still in the middle of getting the university or the college up and going. Go ahead and tell me real quick, sir, where are you in this process of making Clemson's College of Vet Medicine happen?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts right now. So we are walking through the accreditation process. So our accreditation body is the American Veterinary Medical Association Council on Education. And that's really the bar you have to clear. But even prior to that, we've had to go through some steps at Clemson University and the state of South Carolina. So, we're an approved college. We had to get our curriculum approved. There's lots of steps to starting a college. And most universities haven't started a new college for quite a number of years. So you have to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit.
Well, you're building, you have construction going on right now for facilities, correct? What's that like?
Yeah, we have 7 buildings currently under construction simultaneously. So I would say we started out going out to the site, I would say every couple of weeks. And now we're going out on average once a week. And now you can actually tell. Like now, if you go out there, you can see there's buildings coming out of the ground. Initially, they were just moving. It looked like they were just pushing a lot of dirt around. But you don't realize how much work goes into the prep before a building starts coming out. So there's lots happening.
So you had been the dean of vet schools before, and no.
My top rank, I guess, was an associate dean at NC State. Being a dean, and especially being a founding dean, are very different.
Okay. All right. So so the associate dean was what I was thinking. So is this what you thought it was going to be when you took this job? Was your inkling of what you were getting into correct at all?
I would say that's an interesting question. I'm not sure any job I've had, I knew everything about the job before I took it. Yeah. Like there are some things that you find out on the job. I mean, at my core, I'm a veterinary clinician. Like I know medicine, and that's what I've studied my entire career. And I know a little bit about veterinary education that I've accumulated through my career. You've heard of the Peter Principle?
Yes.
So I may fall under that category a little bit.
You might have been promoted up as high as you can be, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I think we all of us a little bit have the imposter syndrome. Like you wake up one day and say, how did I get here?
Yeah.
So we all deal with that a little bit.
I still find myself thinking, who's in charge here? And then my team will look at me and I'm like, oh, it's me. I
agree with that. But I think it's a good question to ask yourself how you got there. I remind myself all the time of the people that enabled me to be successful. Mentors, former students, interns, residents, right now the Clemson administration, all of those people played a role in who I've been allowed to become.
I think that sort of exercise in gratitude is probably really healthy and really helpful.
It keeps you humble.
It's like I found as soon as I'm not humble, the universe makes that happen for me.
So you and I already discussed that we both have daughters, we both have wives, and I think if you're not humble, there's usually a couple of people who will point that out to you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I am right there with you. Well, the reason I want to talk to you a bit today is, I have this sort of ongoing interest in education in general and in veterinary education specifically. And so I'm looking at, Clemson is coming up right down the road and you guys are building 7 buildings and it's this big undertaking. And then I'm looking at and reading and I'm seeing, there's probably about 10-ish College of Veterinary Medicines that are sort of coming online either now or in the next couple of years and things like that. And so I'm looking at and I'm trying to think, what is this education going to look like? Because a lot of these schools are set up very differently than veterinary schools that, we looked at 25 years ago for sure. And so let me sort of open this up by going back to sort of something that you've said a couple of different places I've sort of seen in the press. And so when you're asked what your objectives are for Clemson's College of Veterinary Medicine, one of the things that the phrase that I've seen you use more than once is you'll say that we want to produce day one prepared veterinarians. Can you talk a little bit about what does that mean to you when you say it?
Yeah, so it's not my term. I think veterinary education has really moved into the realm of competency-based veterinary education. So we want our students to be prepared for whatever area of veterinary medicine that they choose to practice in. For us, it means we're going to primarily shoot for producing veterinarians that are ready to practice in the private sector and general practice. So I am sure that we will have some students that are interested in specializing and postgraduate education. So some may want to do a PhD, an internship, or residency. So we will give them the foundation to have those tools to progress in their career. But we won't say that general practice is a second choice. Mm-hmm. We will say that if you choose to go to be a general practitioner in veterinary medicine, that you should own that decision and you should be prepared day one to be out there and participate and contribute to our profession.
It's a big thing for me as a general practicing doctor. Like, I want to see people successful on the first day. And I'm very much a get things done kind of guy. I'm very pragmatic sort of in my nature. And so it speaks to me to be able to produce veterinarians that are going to be competent and they're going to be effective as quickly as possible. And, as I look at this and I think about how we sort of educate doctors, the distributed model of veterinary medicine has definitely gained popularity. And as I look at a lot of the newer schools that are coming online, it seems to be a go-to sort of educational approach for a lot of these schools. And so distributed model being the one where veterinary students are going to, instead of having a designated teaching hospital, they will go out and they will spend time at general practice hospitals and do externships or rotations there to sort of acquire that knowledge. And in a way, I really like this because I think showing people what general practice really is and a general practice pace, I think that's valuable for development. I wonder also about it because I've had externs and students that I've sort of worked with in the past, and I'm always amazed by how much work it is to actually to train somebody and to really mentor them and educate. And so it's not a passive thing of you're just doing your job and they're kind of looking over your shoulder and staying out of the way. It's a bit of a lift. And so let me sort of start by asking you about this and say, we talked about the construction at Clemson a little bit. To what degree is Clemson planning to sort of rely on a distributed model of education?
We will be described as a semi-distributed model. That's the current term. So we will do a significant amount of training on our own campus. So we will have a large animal ambulatory service. We're now planning on having a very small community practice. That community practice will most likely be it'll be a lower income practice. So we'll serve some families in the area that maybe don't have the financial resources. And that'll also allow us to partner with a lot of the community veterinarians throughout South Carolina. And probably the biggest advantage of the distributed model is that it's a throwback to an apprenticeship. So the students will have an idea of who they will be, because statistically, the majority of our students will be general practitioners, and they'll most likely stay in South Carolina. So working with a practitioner like you, for better or for worse, they're going to see every day of what you do. And that's not just about learning how to be a good doctor. That's how it's learning about being a good communicator, being a good business person, being financially resilient. So, in a teaching hospital, there's huge advantages, but there's also probably some disadvantages. And that would go the same thing, that applies to the distributed model as well. But I think I did a partially distributed model when I trained for veterinary school, because I trained in Britain. And I learned a lot of very valuable skills from people that were living that life every day. And so I think that's the value of the distributed model.
So how do you go about selecting hospitals, Steve, to help participate in this? So again, let's say that, I work at a wonderful animal hospital in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and I really love it. It's just such a good organization. I don't think they've ever trained a vet student before. What does that look like as far as the recruiting process, and what kind of quality control is there for the experience the students are getting?
Well, so this will be a true partnership. So we will have faculty that'll be deployed to these practices. So we'll work hand in hand with those practices. And we've been very fortunate at Clemson. This is a combination of the loyalty to Clemson and the loyalty to South Carolina. So a lot of veterinarians have reached out to us to volunteer to be partners with us. And then, of course, we meet with them. We want to make sure that the staff and the doctors really want students. And like you said, it's a pretty heavy lift. So we want to make sure that they know there's a lot of assessment. There's a lot of questions they have to answer. And then right now, when the accreditation body comes, they will visit some of those practices. And when they visit those practices, we will not be present. So they will quiz those practices, both doctors and staff, to make sure they're ready and prepared. And then this is not show and tell. Students have to be actively engaged in case management. So like you say, there's a pretty heavy responsibility on the veterinarians that partner with us.
Yeah. So when you're putting together these, do you call them externships? Do you call them rotations? What do you call these people?
Yeah, so there's varied terms right now. Mostly they're called clinical clerkships.
How long are those when the students go out? Like, how long do they expect to stay at a certain practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. Usually they'll be between 2 and 4 weeks. There may be some core rotations, some elective rotations. But again, the students are going to spend a significant amount of time away from Clemson and with these practitioners.
How did Clemson just come down on the idea of being a semi-distributed school? And then how did you decide what you would house and what you wouldn't house?
That's actually a very good question and a challenging one. So the decision about this distributed model was actually made before they hired me.
Okay.
So that was made, I think, mostly because they thought it was a practical choice and that there had been some other universities that are using that model quite successfully. And running a teaching hospital is not the easiest task in the world. So again, there's pros and cons to both systems. But as you noted, most of the newer veterinary schools right now are using either a distributed or a semi-distributed model.
Is there a looming capacity problem with a distributed model? So the way it was presented to me not long ago was a doctor that I respect, and is a pretty sharp guy, said, look, we've got 5 vet schools basically that have been using a distributed model for some time. And let's say that, and it's gone fairly well from what I can tell. All of the assessments have been good. The doctors I have met coming out of those schools have been very competent, very capable doctors. But the concern he had was that, so we've got 5 schools and they've done it. And let's say they put out 100 students per class. And so that's 5,000 students. We've got 10 more schools that are opening up. And if each one of them has 100 students per class, and they're going to use a distributed model, then we go from 5,000 students to 15,000 students. And, I've seen counts of vet schools in America say there's 30, 32, 35,000, vet clinics in America. You go, well, I got 30,000 vet clinics and 15,000 students, and they're going to cycle through and things. Is there any concern for just not having enough hospitals to support a model like this for all of the schools that are coming in?
I think there may be some concern. So the hope is that we're producing more veterinarians, so eventually there'll be more veterinary hospitals. But I will tell you that Clemson is a little bit different in the fact that we're a land grant institution. We're not going to send our students all over the country.
Right.
We're really focusing on South Carolina. We may cross a little bit into Georgia, a little bit into North Carolina, but really we would like our students to stay in South Carolina for these clerkships, because eventually we want these students to stay in South Carolina when they enter the profession. So some of the other universities that, if they're a private university and they don't have state residents versus out-of-state residents, they are more likely to have clinical partners nationwide. They're more likely than we will be.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. I appreciate that. I appreciate the answer. Is there any sort of support that goes along with the students when they go and do clerkships? So let's say that I have a little vet practice, somewhere in South Carolina, and I would love to have a student, but I really don't have a place for them to stay or things like that. Or I'm thinking, how do you feed them? Where do you keep them? Is there support for that? Or is it, are they camping?
These are all the questions that will keep a dean awake at night, I will tell you, because so if you trained at a traditional veterinary school like you did, right? All 4 years you lived in Gainesville, right? You may have gone to a couple externships and been away from home for a couple of weeks. So we're asking students in the senior year to go to some other areas of the state. So right now we are in the process of raising funds for scholarships and travel stipends that will help. A lot of veterinarians are actually aware of this situation, so they may have an apartment over the practice or over their garage. We plan on reaching out to Clemson alumni who, as you know, are very loyal, to see if there's housing available in whatever region we're deploying these students to. I don't think we're going to just send them out and say, go find a place to stay. There will be support. We're certainly not going to have them camping in the woods while they're on clerkships. At least you can remind me of this in a couple of years.
Well, yeah, exactly. When there's a bunch of tents outside. There's a new tent city around the vet hospital, and they're all the students that are staying there.
That would not be our plan.
Do you have any ideas about the interface for this distributed model and some of the larger corporate groups? And the reason I ask this is, I look at this and I look at this model and I say, well, we've got these students and they're going to be consistently looking for learning opportunities. And then you've got things like housing that are, potential, logistical things we have to juggle. And again, I'm definitely not of the camp of, I'm an independent practice person and I'm terrified of the corporate groups. I don't believe in that. That's not concerns that I have. However, it's not lost on me that if you happen to own a suite of veterinary hospitals and you might have a large need for doctors, do you think that you're going to start to see some programs that are set up specifically around a distributed model? Just trying to think of what that would look like. But if you've got 300 veterinary hospitals, do you launch a sort of a training program or something like that? And so has that sort of been considered, I guess, and what would be your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, so obviously in South Carolina, we're dealing with multiple corporate-owned practices, and not just the large ones that you're familiar with. There's some smaller ones that you don't really know they're corporate-owned until you walk in the door and talk to them. They may just have a cluster of 4 or 5 hospitals, not 300. There may be a possibility that some corporations will align with specific schools. I don't think Clemson will be one of those. I mean, we're aligned with South Carolina. Although this is the Clemson College of Veterinary Medicine, this is the College of Veterinary Medicine for the state of South Carolina. So one advantage that I don't think people have necessarily thought about with corporate-owned practices is if those corporate-owned practices are aligned in how they practice medicine and the standard of care, then they may actually have a built-in curriculum for when our students arrive. So that may actually be an advantage rather than a disadvantage. But right now we're partnering with all comers. Anybody that wants to work with Clemson that provides a good educational opportunity for our students, and for the most part are in South Carolina, that's who we're going to work with.
Yeah, I had the idea earlier that, when you think about the desire to be able to hire veterinarians today, and then you have veterinary students that go in and visit the practices, it kind of reminds me of like when the college football national recruits go and visit the campuses, of just people going in there as a student and getting sort of the red carpet rolled out like, hey, this would be a great place to be. Are there any rules around like gifts or stipends or accommodations? I mean, yeah, is there anything like that as far as, hey, don't treat the vet students too nicely? Anything?
No, I mean, our primary goal, and really this is not just the College of Veterinary Medicine, this is Clemson's strategic plan. Clemson Elevate, the number one pillar on that is to provide the number one student experience.
Yeah.
And so the veterinary medical profession has always been student-centric, and we are going to focus on that. So if that practice provides a good educational experience, and as you know, in your daily life, there's some great days and there's some not so great days.
Yeah.
And they need to experience both.
Well, I think that's hugely valuable. I think one of the biggest challenges for a lot of veterinarians is that they imagine what the lifestyle of a veterinarian will be, and they decide they want that lifestyle. They like the adoration. They like working with the pets. They like those sorts of things. And that lifestyle, you have to actually, I think, really love to actually do the work as well as the lifestyle. And so I think, I don't know, I was just thinking about that recently I think a lot of people pick a lifestyle and say, that's the lifestyle I want to have. And I think that's probably a mistake if you don't factor in what kind of actual work is going to be done here, because that's really what's going to make this happen.
No, I agree. I think being a veterinarian is incredibly rewarding. I mean, I don't think I'd change anything about my career, but my generation of veterinarians, the majority of them went into veterinary medicine because they read the James Herriot stories. And those stories are still in print and they're still on television. And if you watch them and you read those books, there's almost always happy endings.
Yeah.
There's not too many sad endings. And I think they need to see a little bit of a reality check that some people will have bad days in veterinary medicine. It's tough, and you have to make tough decisions.
Well, it's unfortunately a big part of this job is choosing between a couple of not perfect options, you know?
I'm sure you see this when you meet students. We still have a group of students that tell us they wanted to be a physician, but they hate people, so they're going to be a veterinarian. And we know that we spend a great deal of our time with people, and that veterinary medicine is really about people. It's not just about animals.
So I'll leave this. I know there'll be some people who will listen. There's always anytime I talk to vet student deans or to veterinary school deans, there's always people who always want to say, did you ask him for advice on how to get in? A year before you opened, do you have advice for people who are interested in going to vet school? What is your cocktail party piece of advice when someone says to you, my kid's interested in vet school?
So I tell them what I'm telling you, really, that emotionally it's an incredible career, but it's a profession of passion. So we, more than any other profession that I've been exposed to, people come up and tell you, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. And if they really want to drill down and they say, well, what can my son, what can my daughter, what can my grandchild do? I really tell them about the people aspect and to do some things that are outside the box. Like every student that applies to veterinary school loves animals. They've taken care of animals. They've grown up with animals. We like to see some other things like, some leadership opportunities. Have they volunteered in the community? Have they done a little bit more than just interacted with animals? You volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, do some charity work, help people in need, and really understand that you're going to be working more with people in veterinary medicine than just animals. And I will say the profession has done a really good job in that we are approachable. People feel like they can just walk up to you. I don't think somebody walks up to a dentist on the street and opens their mouth and says, have a look.
Yeah.
But people come up to you and ask you about their animals all the time. And I think that's one of the best things about veterinary medicine. We are compassionate, we're empathetic, and most of all, we're approachable.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Steve Marks, thanks so much for being here today. Where can people find you online? Where can they follow what's going on with Clemson?
Yeah, we love that you will follow us. So the Clemson Veterinary School has a website. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I have a LinkedIn. And you'll find us. You may need to look for, we are now a named college, which we're very proud of, and that we are the Harvey S. Peeler Jr. College of Veterinary Medicine. We're named after Senator Peeler. So you can actually search for the Harvey S. Peeler Jr. College of Veterinary Medicine or the Clemson College of Veterinary Medicine.
Outstanding. Well, we'll put some links in the show notes for people to find. Thank you for being here. Guys, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care of yourselves, gang. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much. We always end every talk, go Tigers.
Go Tigers. And that's what I got. Gang, thanks for being here. Thanks to Dr. Marks for being here. Go Tigers, as he says. I hope you guys found this interesting. As always, if you like the episodes, if you get something out of them, I'd love for you to write me an honest review wherever you get your podcast. It always means a lot to me, and it helps people find the show. So anyway, that's what I got today. Gang, be well, everybody. Take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you later on. Bye.